They say blood is thicker than water, but no one warns you what happens when that blood turns cold. I let my daughter and her husband into my home, into my trust, into the last quiet years of my life. I should have known better. I saw the warning signs, but nothing prepares you for betrayal from the people you once rocked to sleep. I knew the smile on Chad's face was fake the moment he stepped onto my porch. That perfect suburban grin he wore like a name tag. Friendly, polished, utterly hollow. I opened the door, wiping my hands on the towel I kept over my shoulder, and there he was, standing behind my daughter, Melissa, with their son Oliver tugging on his hoodie and staring at the ground like he wished he could sink into the welcome mat. "Mom!" Melissa said, all sunshine and practiced cheer. She leaned in to kiss my cheek, the way she always did when there was an audience, even if the only witness this time was the neighbor's dog barking through the hedge. "You look great. Doesn't she look great, Chad?" Chad's eyes flicked over me like I was an item on a checklist. "Sure," he said, "healthy as ever." Then he pushed past Melissa, with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, and didn't wait for an invitation. I stepped aside. Of course I did. That's what mothers do. Inside, I had the living room just the way I liked it. Quiet, tidy, with the afternoon light slanting in over the piano I hadn't played in months. Chad tossed his bag onto my floral armchair like it was a hotel luggage rack. Melissa followed with a container of homemade something I hadn't asked for, and Oliver mumbled a hello before disappearing down the hall. I didn't blame him. If I were 14, I'd have run too. I made tea, because that's what you do when there's tension in the room. You put the kettle on and pretend the steam will dissolve it. Melissa chatted about traffic, soccer schedules, how expensive everything had gotten. I nodded in the right places. Chad scrolled on his phone, barely listening. "We were thinking," Melissa said, stirring honey into her cup like she was about to ask for a kidney. "It might be good to get together more often. You know, spend some time as a family." "That'd be nice," I said, though I knew better. There was always a reason underneath her sweetness. And it didn't take long to show itself. "We've been talking about the future," Chad said suddenly, looking up. "Long-term stuff. Retirement, inheritance, financial planning." I set my cup down. "Nothing urgent," Melissa added quickly. "Just, you've done so much. Dad's pension, the house. Maybe there's a way to make sure it's all being managed properly. For everyone's sake." And there it was. The mask slipped for a second, just long enough for me to see what this visit was really about. I smiled. Tightly. "Everything's fine. My affairs are in order." Chad didn't blink. Still, it might help to revisit things. A lot's changed since Paul passed. He never called him Dad, not even your husband. Just Paul. Like the man was a footnote. Later, while they unpacked upstairs, I went into the kitchen and stared at the envelope I kept taped to the back of the pantry door. Paul's old insurance paperwork, his union settlement, the small life insurance policy, what was left after the cancer bills and the funeral. It wasn't millions, but it was mine. Ours, earned through sweat and 60-hour weeks, and late nights when I'd packed sandwiches he was too tired to eat. That evening, at dinner, I noticed Oliver barely touched his food. Chad made a comment, joking but sharp, about spoiled kids who don't know how good they have it. Melissa laughed a second too late. I didn't. After the dishes, I sat with Oliver on the back porch for a minute. He pulled his hoodie tight around his face like armor. I asked if everything was all right. He shrugged. "They're just stressed," he said, "all the time." When they left the next morning, Melissa kissed my cheek again and said, "We'll talk soon, okay?" Chad lingered by the door. "Think about what we said. It's not about now. It's about the future." I locked the door behind them and stood in the silence that followed like a survivor after a storm. Then I made tea again, this time for myself, and sat in my chair, the one he'd thrown his bag onto without asking, and held the warm cup like a question I didn't know how to answer yet. The knock came a week later. I was in the middle of trimming back the rose bushes when I saw Melissa's car pull up. No call, no warning, just the sound of tires crunching gravel and the familiar screech of her brakes. When she stepped out, she had sunglasses perched on her head, and that same "don't be mad" smile she used as a teenager after coming home past curfew. "Hey, Mom," she called, like this was a casual Tuesday drop-by. "Mind if we crash for a few days? The contractor ripped out our kitchen floor, and it's a war zone. We're practically inhaling glue." Before I could answer, Chad was already popping the trunk. He didn't wave, just pulled out bags and started up the walkway like this had been the plan all along. I wanted to say no. God, I wanted to say no. But saying no to your child feels like trying to turn a freight train with your bare hands. So I nodded instead, because what else could I do? They moved in like smoke, filling the corners of my house before I had time to brace myself. Oliver took the guest room again. Melissa and Chad set up in my bedroom without asking, said it had better light. I slept in the den on the old pullout, the one with a bar in the middle that made my back feel like someone had stomped across it. By the second morning, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Chad spread out his laptop and files across my dining table. He paced during calls, barking phrases like market volatility and asset migration. His voice bounced off the walls. Melissa followed me into the kitchen, holding a folder. "I've been thinking," she said, in that sing-song voice people use when they're about to lie. "Your papers are a mess. All that stuff in the pantry. It's not safe there. Chad could organize everything, just temporarily." I was holding the kettle. I set it down slowly. "No," I said. "Just that. Clear. Firm." Melissa blinked. "Why not?" "Because it's my business," I said. "Not yours. Not his." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "We're your family, Mom. We're not trying to steal from you. You brought that up, not me." She didn't answer, just walked out and left the folder on the counter. That afternoon, I noticed something strange. The drawer in my desk, the one I always kept locked, sat slightly open. I checked it. My checkbook was there, but the envelope with my old account details was gone. I turned the house upside down. Nothing. When Chad came in from his meeting, I asked if he'd been in my office. "Why would I?" he said, shrugging off his jacket. "You losing stuff again?" I looked at him. Really looked. Not the husband of my daughter, not the father of my grandson, just a man in my home who'd started acting like the owner. Later that evening, I heard whispering from the hallway. Their voices, low and tense. "She's not gonna budge," Melissa said. "She doesn't have a choice," Chad replied. "She just doesn't realize it yet." I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the pull-out bar, though it didn't help, but because I realized I'd let wolves into my home, thinking they were still family. In the morning, I found a notarized form on the kitchen counter. Durable power of attorney. My name at the top. Chad's at the bottom. Melissa poured coffee like nothing was unusual. "It's just in case," she said. "If something ever happens to you, we just want to be prepared." I looked her dead in the eye. "Then I suggest you prepare for a no." She laughed. Not kindly, not nervously, just like she'd already decided my answer didn't matter. That night, I locked the pantry. Then I checked to make sure the lock on my bedroom door still worked, even if it wasn't mine anymore. The lock didn't matter in the end. The next morning, I found the pantry door ajar, the key still dangling from the hook where I'd left it. I always check the door twice. Always. But maybe not this time. Maybe I was slipping, or maybe someone else had been careful not to leave fingerprints. I checked the back of the pantry where I kept the envelope, the one with Paul's insurance payout, and the remaining savings from our joint account. It was gone. I didn't say anything right away. Not to Melissa. Not to Chad. I made my tea as usual, hands steady, even though my stomach was twisting like an old dish rag. Chad was already seated at the table, earbuds in, tapping on his laptop like he owned the place. Melissa was on the phone with a friend, laughing loudly about a spa weekend she'd earned. I went upstairs and quietly opened Oliver's door. He was sitting cross-legged on the bed, headphones on, staring at his phone. He jumped when he saw me, pulled the earbuds out. "Sorry, Grandma. You didn't happen to see anyone near the pantry yesterday, did you?" He hesitated, just enough to let me know he had. "I think," he started, then stopped. "Maybe Mom was looking for something?" That was enough. I called the bank. After 5 minutes of climbing through the robotic phone tree, I got a human. She verified my identity, then paused when I asked about the balance. "There was a transfer yesterday," she said. $3,200, sent to an external investment firm account, authorized online. I closed my eyes. "Can you tell me who authorized it?" There was a silence then. "The account lists a secondary authorized user, Chad Carter." I don't remember hanging up. I remember the kettle whistling, high and angry, as I sat at the table across from him. He didn't even look up. "You took money from me." Chad finally glanced over, calm as anything. "It's a temporary investment. Low risk, high return. You'll thank me later." "I didn't give you permission." "You did," he said, pushing his chair back. "Power of attorney, remember?" "I never signed that." He smirked. "No? Huh. Maybe someone else did." I stared at Melissa, who had just come into the kitchen. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," she said, and that one word sounded like a knife wrapped in gauze. "It's not like we're stealing. We're just trying to build something. For Oliver. For the future. It's my money." "And it's just sitting there," she snapped. "You live alone. You drive once a week. You've got enough to last 3 lifetimes and no one to leave it to but us. Why shouldn't we—" "Because I'm not dead yet," I said. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Later, after they'd both stomped upstairs and slammed doors like teenagers, I went into the garage and found the box I hadn't opened since Paul's funeral. Inside, under his fishing tackle and the flag from his Navy service, were 2 things I needed: the original joint account agreement and a thumb drive with our scanned financial files. I tucked them into my purse. That night, I sat in the dark den, lights off, listening. Around 10, I heard Melissa's voice rise in the hallway. Angry, urgent. "She's going to ruin this," she hissed. "She won't," Chad said. "She can't. Just keep her calm until I finish moving the rest." I didn't wait to hear more. I opened my email and sent copies of every document I had to my old friend Margaret, who worked part-time at a legal aid clinic. I added one line. "They've started. I'm not letting them finish." The next morning, I found another document on the counter, a consent form for full financial oversight. Chad had even highlighted the signature line. I folded it in half and fed it straight into the garbage disposal. Then I went upstairs, packed a small overnight bag, and hid it in the coat closet. I didn't know where I'd go yet, only that I wouldn't stay. Not much longer. I thought I still had time, maybe a day or 2, just enough to speak to Margaret in person, to sort out a place to stay, to figure out how to sever what was left of this twisted umbilical cord. But time has a way of speeding up when you need it to slow down. The confrontation happened the following night, and it started the way these things often do, quietly, almost politely. I was in the kitchen drying a plate when Chad walked in. No warning. No, "How was your day?" Just that look in his eye like he was checking off a task. "We need you to sign something," he said, setting a folder on the counter. "I'm not signing anything," I replied, not even bothering to open it. "It's not optional anymore," he said, calm as you please. "This is happening." Then Melissa appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes hard. "We've waited long enough," she said. "We gave you space, respect, time." "You gave me threats," I interrupted, "and theft, and lies." Chad took a step toward me, not rushed, measured, like a man used to controlling rooms with silence. I held my ground. Barely. "You're going to sign," he said again, quieter now, "or you're going to regret it." And that's when it happened. Melissa moved first. Fast. Too fast. She reached for the folder on the counter, shoved it toward me, and when I stepped back, just a small step, she snapped. "You ungrateful woman," she screamed. "You'd rather let it rot than help your own daughter." She grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked me forward, the kind of motion you only see in bad dreams and police footage. I stumbled, my hip slamming into the counter. The pain was white-hot, blooming down my leg. I opened my mouth, not to scream, but to breathe. Just breathe, because I couldn't believe what was happening. That's when Chad stepped in. Not to stop her, to finish it. He shoved me, a flat-handed blow to the shoulder that sent me crashing to the floor. My back hit the linoleum, then my head, and I saw stars. Not metaphorically. Actual flecks of silver dancing across the ceiling. Somewhere above me, Oliver yelled, "Stop it! Leave her alone!" His voice cracked like a boy still learning how to be a man. Then footsteps, his, running upstairs. Melissa stood over me, panting, her face flushed red and blotchy. "All you ever do is judge. You never supported us. You never believed in Chad." "You're right," I said, through blood in my mouth. "I didn't." I reached for the kitchen drawer. Not for a knife, for the phone. Chad saw it, moved toward me. But I was faster. I punched in the numbers without thinking. 9-1-1. The dispatcher's voice was calm, rehearsed. "What's your emergency?" "My daughter and her husband just attacked me," I said, words shaky but clear. "My name is Evelyn Harper. I live at 21 West Sycamore Lane. Please send someone." Melissa backed away like the words were bullets. Chad froze. The line stayed open. The operator kept talking, asking questions I barely heard. I just repeated, "They hit me." She pulled my hair. He knocked me down. 15 minutes later, I was in an ambulance. The paramedic was kind, didn't say much, just checked my vitals and offered a tissue for the blood at my lip. Through the back window, I saw them on the lawn. Melissa pacing, Chad talking to a police officer, hands in the air, gesturing like it was all a misunderstanding. I wasn't handcuffed. They weren't either. Not yet. At the hospital, a nurse documented my injuries. A social worker came in with a clipboard and soft eyes. I told her everything. About the money, the threats, the documents, the power of attorney I never signed. She asked if I had any proof. I said yes. I had emails, bank records, even an audio file Oliver had sent to my phone just before I left the house. He'd recorded part of their argument from the hallway. By midnight, I was in a quiet room with a warm blanket and an IV in my arm. My head ached, my hip throbbed, but for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something close to clarity. Margaret called the next morning. "I'm coming," she said. "You're not doing this alone." I closed my eyes and let the words settle like a balm, because I wasn't. Not anymore. Margaret arrived that afternoon, wrapped in a brown trench coat, and the kind of fury only a 78-year-old former IRS investigator could carry. She didn't hug me, not her style, but she sat beside my hospital bed, took one look at my face and said, "We're going to bury them in paperwork." By the next day, the hospital discharged me under observation, and Margaret insisted I come stay with her. Her condo wasn't big, but it had a clean guest room, a recliner that didn't squeak, and a kitchen table that hadn't been taken over by a man in loafers barking about markets. I left with a police report, a medical evaluation, and a restraining order that stated clearly, neither Chad nor Melissa was to come within 100 feet of me. It felt surreal, like I was the victim on a procedural drama, only without the neat 42-minute resolution. The officer who delivered the paperwork warned me not to contact them. "Let the courts handle it," he said. "This could get ugly." I didn't respond. It was already ugly. The first court hearing came 2 weeks later. Margaret, bless her, had already retained a lawyer from her network, a brisk, sharp woman named Dana, who had no patience for bullies in golf shirts. We filed a formal complaint: financial abuse of an elder, theft by deception, and assault with injury. Dana also filed a motion to block Chad's access to any of my accounts, citing the forged power of attorney and the illegal transfer of funds. Chad responded by lawyer shopping until he found some puffed-up suburban defense guy who looked like he played poker at country clubs and thought women were hysterical by nature. Their angle was clear: paint me as senile, confused, emotionally unstable, the kind of woman who might forget she signed something and overreact to a misunderstanding. They underestimated me. They underestimated Margaret. They really underestimated Oliver, because 3 days before our first real hearing, Oliver reached out. He texted from a friend's number, just one line: "I want to testify." Dana nearly fell out of her chair when I told her. "You understand what this means, right?" she said. "They'll try to rip him apart." "I know," I said. "But he knows what he saw. And he's not a child anymore." Oliver appeared at court with a school-issued blazer and a trembling chin. But he didn't waver. He told the judge everything: how they yelled, how Chad handled my paperwork when they thought I wasn't home, how his mom stopped being herself when Chad was around. He played the audio file on speaker. Melissa's voice shrill, Chad's cold and commanding. There was silence in the courtroom when it ended. Dana didn't need to say a word. After that, the tide shifted. The financial firm confirmed that the account Chad transferred money into had already been red-flagged for questionable activity. Turns out he'd been trying to shift my funds through a network of short-term holding accounts, a sloppy scheme that looked more like desperation than strategy. The judge granted a freeze on all joint financial access. Melissa's signature on the fake documents was matched to her mortgage papers from 6 years ago. For the first time since this all began, Chad looked nervous. Not furious, not smug, just cornered. Melissa didn't say a word in court. She stared straight ahead like someone trying not to hear her own life crumbling around her. After the hearing, I sat outside the courthouse on a cement bench, Dana beside me flipping through papers. I watched the wind lift leaves across the pavement and thought about Paul. He would have hated this, all of it. Lawyers, courtrooms, watching our daughter unravel like this. But he also would have told me I was right to fight. Margaret handed me a paper cup of coffee. "You still want to settle?" "No," I said. "Not anymore." I was tired. God, I was tired. But I wasn't broken, and I wasn't going to let them take anything else. The next step would be longer, harder, but I'd already done the worst part. I'd stopped being afraid of the truth. 3 months passed. Long months. Court dates, depositions, paperwork that could fill a forest. But eventually, the system, slow, grinding, bureaucratic, did what it was supposed to do. It caught up with them. Chad took a plea deal. Fraud. Elder abuse. He avoided jail but got 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a fine that wiped out the savings he hadn't already lost, chasing phantom returns. The judge was clear. Another incident, another step over the line, and he'd serve time. Melissa didn't speak during the sentencing. She didn't look at me, not even once. Her lawyer negotiated a restraining order in exchange for avoiding charges, citing familial distress and mental strain. I didn't argue. I didn't need revenge. I needed space and peace. The judge granted full restitution. My accounts were returned to my sole control. The banks reversed what they could. The rest came from court-ordered garnishments. It wasn't about the money anymore. It never really had been. It was about what it stood for: control, dignity, autonomy, things no one had the right to take from me. Oliver, bless that boy, stayed in touch. At first through Margaret, cautiously. Then a letter arrived. Real paper, stamped envelope. Inside, a drawing of the two of us on the back porch, drinking tea, with a single sentence underneath. I always felt safest there. I read it twice. Then I cried for the first time since all of it happened. Not because I was sad, but because somewhere in that terrible mess, something had survived. I sold the house a week after the final hearing. Not out of spite, but necessity. I couldn't walk those halls anymore without remembering Melissa yelling from the stairs, or Chad's voice floating down the hallway like poison. The realtor asked if I wanted to renovate before listing it. I said no. Let the new owners paint over it all themselves. With Margaret's help, I found a one-story adobe-style place just outside Tucson. Quiet, sunny, nothing fancy, but it had what I needed. A good porch, a kitchen that felt like mine, and neighbors who didn't ask too many questions. I used to joke that Paul and I would retire out west, somewhere warm, where winter didn't feel like punishment. He never made it. But I did. The first evening in my new home, I unpacked slowly. One suitcase, a box of books, my teapot, and Paul's photo in a worn leather frame. I set it on the windowsill. Watched the sun dip low over the cactus-lined ridge. In the quiet, I heard my own breath. Steady, unhurried. I'd lost my daughter, and that ache would never truly vanish. But I'd gained something too. A line in the sand, a rediscovered voice. The simple, powerful truth that I didn't owe anyone my silence, especially not those who used love like a leash. In the kitchen drawer, I tucked away a copy of my new will. Simple, straightforward, everything to Oliver. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. The next morning, I made tea, sat on the porch, and for the first time in years, I drank it while the house stood still around me. Not storming, not watching, not waiting to be invaded. Just still. And mine.